Welcome to the Realty Trader Talk podcast, sponsored by Realty Trader, where business meets mindset. I'm here with a good friend of mine. We're going to have a fire podcast today. Justin Giovinazzo is here today. And Justin, thank you for being here, bro.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm thrilled. So I'm going to start out this podcast today. I have a question. And my question is, tell the audience something that people don't know about you.
Okay, so, Jordan, you know me well.
Okay.
I would say majority of our community knows me and knows what I do. So I am really well known for going the extra mile and helping people, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, any kind of resources, right? One thing that people probably don't know about me is half the time I'm doing this and I'm helping people, I'm running on burnout and compassion fatigue.
Really?
Yes.
So how do you get through that? Like, how do you push through that?
So honestly, one, my faith. My faith is the reason I do what I do. Two, probably my support group. Three, having my clinical background and my support system. I have a lot of coping skills that help me with burnout and compassion fatigue. And honestly, I would say another reason is purpose. It ties in with my faith, but I feel like my purpose now is to help others.
I do know you, and I see you helping a lot of people. So, I mean, your purpose is being fulfilled for sure. I know the community appreciates it. I personally know some people myself who you've helped. Moving into, I want you to walk me through what it looked like before your rock bottom, and then what was your rock bottom?
Okay, sure. Previously before my rock bottom, grew up normal. Originally from New Jersey, moved to Port St. Lucie in 1989. I was 7 years old, so I've seen our community change quite a bit since then. But, growing up in New Jersey, I had a very big family. My mom was one of 10 siblings. My dad was one of 6. Very big community. I didn't struggle with love and belonging as a child. However, moving here in 1989, back then, St. Lucie County was all woods, very different southern town. So it was a bit of a culture shock for me. Segregation and racism was still going on back then. Where my house was zoned, I was transferred to Fort Pierce to go to school, ended up getting attacked for being white. The school board told my mother that, they send 3 white kids to the black schools and 3 black kids to the white schools. And I remember, listening to her on the phone and get that news. I started kind of questioning things, because I wasn't used to that in New Jersey. So, like I said, a bit of a culture shock. So some things happened, throughout childhood, very rough childhood, fought a lot. But still, semi-normal. I've always been pretty good with pulling myself out of that negative self-talk and that negative mindset and just trying to be positive. 14 years old, I get into a car accident and was prescribed opiates. Wasn't taking them at first, and then once I did, the floodgates of my addiction opened, and that's what led into my rock bottom, was that moment forward.
My rock bottom led from an accident with opiates too. I was a little older, but a sheriff hit me, and I was going to take after the cops. I was going to get them. So I'm going to sue the sheriff's station, and I'm going to get all this money.
Yeah.
And, I didn't want to do surgery. I was I think 21, best shape ever, squatting 500 pounds, benching over 400. So I didn't want to get surgery. So I go and I didn't know at the time it was a pain mill, a pain pill,
Yeah.
whatever they are, clinic. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get these. Then that's going to show I have these problems. And, it led down this whole road of addiction and my rock bottom. So, I can identify with that. So pain pills led you to, where did that end up leading you to?
Well, sure. And it kind of ties in with your story, So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we did have all these pain clinics, these pill mills all around. I remember it was kind of like a normal thing around here. I'm getting prescribed these opiates, started doing other substances. Because of the bullying and stuff that happened, previous years, I've kind of struggled with self-esteem. So when some of the kids that were my age were finding out that I was getting, prescribed opiates, and then also to, I was getting marijuana from somebody that I knew, and so the kids my age couldn't get the substances that I was getting. Not only am I abusing these things, but also too I'm selling them. Through my personal recovery program and a lot of self-inventory, what I discovered is I used to say that I was selling drugs back then to get free drugs. However, for me, it was supply and demand, right? The kids needed something that I had, and I needed something from them. I needed to boost my ego off feeling wanted and needed, So in itself, that fueling that ego was like a drug for me as well. With addiction, it always progresses. So it goes from marijuana, drinking, these opiates that I'm prescribed, to lying to the doctors at a young age to get stronger medications, telling them it's not working anymore, getting more, right? So I learned how to manipulate at a young age. Then it goes into, of course, other substances. Around the time I was 18, I was with my high school sweetheart. She comes home one day. We're sitting there talking, and she pulls out a pregnancy test. And she says, listen, my father struggled with addiction, and, he was in and out of my life in jails. And she said, I'm not going to do this to our son. So if you want to be with me and have this kid, you have to stop. And so 18 years old, like I planned on marrying this girl. She was the love of my life. At 18 years old, your high school sweetheart, that's all you know.
Right.
I maintained a part-time job from the time I was 12 to 18, even though I was selling drugs, right? So I had money. I was ready to have this baby. I was ready to do this family thing. And this was the first time in my life somebody actually knew the severity of my drug addiction and was putting some kind of clause on how much I use. She told me, she said, if you want to have this kid, you have to stop doing hard drugs. You have to stop selling drugs. She goes, I don't care if you come home from work and you have a beer to relax. I don't care if you come home from work and hit some weed a few times to relax. But she's like, all the other stuff has to stop. And, at that time, I wanted this family. I was totally oblivious to what the disease of addiction really is. And I thought I had the power to stop on my own. And I did for quite some time, right? So I did. The whole time she's pregnant, I quit everything. I stopped hanging out with certain people. I was working full time. I dropped out of high school to get my GED so I could work full time. Around the time my son was 3 months old, she comes home one day, I come home one day from work, and she looks at me and she has all her stuff packed, and she's like, hey, listen, my mom's on her way to come get me. I'm leaving you. She goes, I can't be with you. You're not the person I fell in love with. You're absolutely miserable. And, to me, we talk about it in the recovery world, but, restless, irritable, and discontent, they say. I'm white knuckling my recovery. I'm miserable because I really just want to get high. I'm trying to muscle through it. And I thought that's what recovery was at the time. The moment she left with her mom, it was back off to the races. And I wasn't even heartbroken, and that's what the disease of addiction does to me, is now that the reins are off, it's off to the races, right? I'm back using, I'm back partying. And now because I'm hanging out with an older crowd, the substances have changed. My progression changes. At this time, there was some different opiates that were on the street that were very, very, very strong and potent. I started doing those at the age of 18, and man, my addiction from that point forward really progressed and got worse. Full-blown opiate and benzo addict, daily alcohol consumption.
So where did that lead you?
Prison.
Prison.
My first time going to prison.
Really?
Yes.
What changed? Did you get clean? And what was prison your rock bottom, or did it keep going?
It kept going.
Kept going. So what was your rock bottom?
As I mentioned, that was my first time going to prison. So what my rock bottom was, by this time I had been to prison twice. I had gotten out, and once again, I was trying to stay sober in the very beginning, but that didn't work. So, I'm back in full-blown addiction. I'm back to selling drugs. By this time, the pain mills and all that were getting closed, and the DEA came in and put the databases in the pharmacies and stuff like that. So for me, my addiction, it went from having endless supplies to now, not being able to get my hands on what fuels that addiction. And not only that, but everything, and the prices raised tremendously. So at that time I started dabbling with other substances, harder substances. Was selling basically just my all-time low for my addiction. It was during that time that this girl that I was dating, her family had stepped in and made her go to rehab. She went to rehab, I went to jail. My parents bonded me out for Thanksgiving. And so she's sober and she's doing the recovery thing. I started following her into the recovery thing, still questioning whether it was possible for me to even get sober. A lot of fear surrounded whether I could do it or not. However, I was doing it. I ended up relapsing. I had 90 days sober. And when I ended up relapsing, things got really bad. Ended up getting, some more charges while I was on bond and going to jail. So while I was in jail, I'm thinking that they're gonna come at me with 10 years and I'll get them down to 5 years and I'll sign 5 years and I'll go to prison and get it over with. I signed up for the drug program. The county jail had a drug program at that time, and I was in the drug program and I was going through the notions because once again, in my mind, I didn't think it was possible for me to stay sober. Like I thought I was a defective human being. I thought I was broken. So, I'm going through the notions of this drug program. I'm faking it till you, fake it till you make it, like they say. I get a call to go down to see my lawyer. And when I walk in the room to go see my lawyer, she, sits her briefcase down. She pulls out a piece of paper. It was an email from the state attorney. And she looks at me and she says, listen, she goes, I have your deal from the state attorney. The state attorney told me to tell you personally that he's sick of seeing your name come across his desk. She goes, in the state of Florida, we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. Not a lot of people know about it, and it's called habitual felony offender. And she goes, because this is your 3rd time going to prison, and you're going to prison. She goes, you're getting the habitual felony offender. And she goes, your offers the habitual felony offender 30 years day for day max. At that time, it was like quicksand. Quicksand had stretched all around me, right?
I can't even imagine.
And I felt like I was suffocating and the walls had closed in, and I started like trying to barter with her. And I said, ma'am, listen, if you get me 5 years, I'll sign 5 years right now. I'm not doing 30. I was like, get me 5 years and I'll get out of both of your hair. She goes, no, like you're not getting it. By law, you have to get these 30 years. And she grabs that piece of paper, puts it in her briefcase, and she hits the door for the officer to come, and she's gone because she thinks I'm going to flip out. And I was just in complete shock. And all I could think is my addiction took me too far this time. Like I always thought if there was a little bit of wiggle room, I can get out of it and keep getting high. And I was like, no, like this is it. Like I played with fire and I'm going to get burned. But needless to say, I go back to the dorm. First person I call is the girlfriend. She's still out, doing the recovery thing. And she says, listen, me and you need to have a talk. And I'm like, okay. And I'm waiting for me to tell her that I'm getting 30 years and we break up. She goes, well, let me go first. And I'm like, okay. And she says, well, my support system has talked to me and they said that me and you are toxic and I'm not going to stay sober if I stay with you, so I'm breaking up with you. And I'm like, well, good, because I'm getting 30 years, and I just slammed the phone down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was expecting that conversation to go that way with us breaking up once I told her. And then so the second phone call was to my mother and father. My mother wasn't talking to me at the time. She was so disappointed in me. But my father was always there no matter what. So I was calling really to speak with him. And, I got the butterflies in my stomach. Like, I don't want to break his heart and tell him what just happened in that lawyer's office, but I need somebody. Like, I need somebody to be there with me. And in that emotional, pain and turmoil that I was going through. When I call home, my mom, she answers, and she's actually talking to me for a second. I'm like, so, okay, maybe she forgives me. And she says, listen, she goes, your lawyer just called here, and your lawyer was just on the phone with your dad. Your dad had a heart attack while he was on the phone with your lawyer. He's in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. She goes, you probably killed your father. Don't ever call back here again. And she slams the phone down. Now, the girlfriend breaking up with me, like I was expecting that, and yeah, it stung, but like this was like the atomic bomb, is that this news possibly killed my father. So the third phone call, the only other person that would answer the phone for me was my youngest son's mother. And I call her and she says, listen, she goes, I just hung up with your other son's mother. Both of your kids are acting out at home. They're acting out at school. You did this to them again. She goes, don't call back here till you get your life together. And once again, it was like the quicksand, feeling where the walls were stretching in on me. And I was like, man, all I could think is my addiction took me too far. At that time, the only way I could see out was to commit suicide. And I walked up to my cell and I had a full-blown plan, and I was just completely numb. I just wanted to do it, and I wanted to end this. And in our county jail, between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock is count time in the evenings. And so I planned it at 6 o'clock because once all the doors were locked, I was going to wait till the very end to do this. And I knew because all the doors were locked, by the time anybody got to me, it'd be too late. And I'm laying under my blanket, and I have the sheet tied around my neck. And I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting. And I'm waiting and waiting for these doors to shut so I can go do this. And I just want to do it and get it over with. Like, I'm ready. I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting, and I'm getting mad because I'm waiting for the doors to shut, and they're not shutting yet. And I just want them to shut so I can get it over with. And all of a sudden, I get this moment of peace that comes over me. And to me, I feel like it was God. I believe in God to me. And I guess that's all that matters is like my experience with this. But this peace that came over me, and it said, listen, you didn't get to 30 years yet. You don't know what's going to happen. So if you do this, you might end things before you find out what happens. And your mom didn't say your dad died. He's on the way to the hospital with a heart attack. And if you kill yourself, you might actually give him a real heart attack and he dies. Or if your father does die and then you kill yourself, then your family's going to be planning 2 funerals. Don't be selfish. And then I start that was enough for me to calm down. Then I start barding with myself and talking myself out of it. And I was like, listen, if I get 30 years and this is my life, at least I don't have to be selfish. And like my kids could at least grow up with a father, and I could write them, letters and see them through visitation and phone calls, and they can have a piece of me even though like I screwed up. And so that was enough for me to untie the sheet around my neck. And as soon as I did, the door shut. And they were actually like 5 minutes late shutting that day. And so like I bawled like a little baby because I knew to me like that was a divine intervention. 8 o'clock, the doors pop, and because I'm in this drug program, some 12-step members were coming in to do volunteer work and bring in a recovery meeting. I went down to that meeting and I was like full of emotions. I was an emotional roller coaster. It was the first time I ever shared in a recovery meeting. It was like 100% honest. And I raised my hand and I shared, and I at that time I was scared to cry in front of a bunch of men, so I'm looking at the sky as I'm talking because I'm fighting the tears from coming out, and I let everybody know what just happened, and I said I was just on the verge to kill myself and something divine happened and talked me out of it. Afterwards, the volunteer, he came up to me and he said, how about I mentor you? He said, how about I mentor you, and if I take you through this and you stay sober, it's worth it. And still, I had this doubt that I could never stay sober. I thought I was broken and defective. But I had no other options. And I said yes to that gentleman, and that gentleman came in. He volunteered his time. Every Wednesday, he would come into the chapel, meet me in the chapel. We got permission from the jail. He would meet me in the chapel for 30 minutes, an hour, and I'd see him every Saturday night when he brought the meeting in. And, he mentored me, and I've been sober since.
Wow. Amazing. That is an amazing story. So when he mentored you, what happened? Did you end up going to prison? How did that work?
Yes.
And did he keep mentoring you after your prison?
Yes, correct. Okay, yes. Well, so what happened was I had a complete change. From this gentleman mentoring me, for me to stop fighting and for me to start taking that recovery program serious, I started getting honest about things and started working on myself. And I did. I completely changed, and I started mentoring other men. And I guess this kind of ties in with that question you asked me in the beginning, the one thing people don't know about me. I made a pact with myself, and I made a pact with God when I was doing this. I said, God, if you're real and you relieve me of my drug addiction and my alcoholism, I will do anything you want. I will serve you. I'll help whoever you want. But the pact I made with myself is I never want to forget what it felt like to be that hopeless junkie, because when I was reaching out for help, nobody knew how to help me. Everybody, I always joke and say people treated me like I had coronavirus. People treated me like I had the plague. They would stay away from me. That lonely feeling and that broken feeling, I never wanted to forget that, and I don't want another human being to ever feel like that if I can help them. And so those were the 2 pacts I made in the beginning. So I stayed in the recovery program. I started mentoring other men. They kept me for an additional 4 months. The day came for me to go to sentencing, but what happened was I kept fighting it, and I told them I was going to take it to trial, because I wasn't willing to take the 30 years. The lawyer came to see me one day, and she says, listen, she goes, I got them down to 10 years, but you have 24 hours to accept this plea. It's still going to be a habitual felony offender, so you have to do 10 years mandatory in Department of Corrections. However, like, it's either this or 30. And she goes, you need to decide right now. And me being very stubborn, I was like, listen, like, I'll take 5 years. Like, if you guys want to do 5 years right now, go tell the state attorney 5 years and we can end this. And she's like, no, it's either 10 or 30. You know, I've already talked to him. And I was like, tell him 5. Let's try it. And she leaves upset. I go back to the dorm. The emergency shipped me off to court, like within an hour of her leaving. I go right to the courthouse. They take me right up to the 3rd floor, right in front of the judge. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I messed up. You know, this isn't good. I'm trying to talk to my public defender. She's standing next to me and I'm trying to talk to her like, hey, what's going on? She won't even like look at me. Her face is red. And I'm like, this isn't good. The state attorney, the judge comes out and we start the hearing, and the state attorney walks over to the judge and he hands him a piece of paper. And the judge starts reading it and he says, okay, we're here to find you, guilty of this habitual felony offender, and the state's offering 30 years. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't good at all, and
like, I wish I took the 10.
yeah,
Right.
I was definitely, trying to go back and take the 10 at that
Right.
point. But what this whole experience has taught me is, like I said, I'm a believer. I believe in God. I start praying to this God that I have this new relationship with that I don't know anything about, that I'm trusting in, which is scary, right? And I'm like, God, like, I give my life to you, right? Like, I'll do anything. Just please give me the chance. Now that I'm really sober and I see that sobriety is real and recovery is real, like, please give me a chance. Please don't let me get 10 or 30. Like, I want to be around my kids. I want to see my kids grow up. And I say a prayer, and the judge, he asked me if I have anything to say. So I realize I'm pleading out to the judge. And for the first time ever, I took accountability in that courtroom. I said, Your Honor, listen, yes, I did these things. I did these things under the influence of drugs. If you look at my criminal record, it's all drug-related offenses, and I said, I'm not here to make excuses. Like, I'm here to face the consequences of my actions like a man. I said, however, I've been in this recovery program, for 7 months. It's a 90-day program. They kept me 4 months because I really changed and I've been helping other men. I said, I've went the extra mile. I got a mentor and I'm doing all these things. And I said, Your Honor, like, for once in my life, I see recovery is real and it's possible for me. I never thought it was possible before. I said, all I'm asking is that you give me a chance. Give me a chance to go out there and live my life and, like, actually do this thing sober. And the judge takes a recess and he comes back and he looks at me and he says, Mr. Giovinazzo, I don't know why I'm doing this. He said, but I'm going to sentence you to 6 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by 4 years of probation, which is a total of 10 years habitual felony offender. So I still got found guilty of the habitual felony offender offense. However, I was able to get good behavior, and I did 4 years, 11 months off of that. So the whole time I was incarcerated, I jumped right into recovery. And the Florida prison system is riddled with drugs, and there was real alcohol, at one of the prisons that I was at, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on. But there was a few people that were interested in sobriety, and we clicked together, and I started mentoring other men. This one prison I was at, Realty Correctional Institution, they had a drug program, an IOP drug program. I got involved with that. I talked to the counselors and the clinical director. I told them when I get out, I want to be a substance abuse counselor. So they started helping me. While I was in there, I was an inmate group facilitator. And so after 16 months of running this program as an inmate group facilitator with the help of the counselors, I was awarded my CAC through an outside organization, CAC Certified Addictions Counselor. So this way I could work in treatment when I get out. And that's a God thing, right? The way the doors opened up for me to be able to work with this outside organization while I'm in prison, and for me to get my CAC, it's 100% a God thing. And so, my mentor, the whole time I'm in communication with him is through letters. If I'm going through something in there, I'm going through some kind of turmoil, I would write him a letter and then I'd send it out to him. By the time I got a letter back with the answer to my problem, it'd be a month later. So I had to learn to rely on this newfound relationship I had with my higher power, the help of the counselors in there. One big part of my recovery is helping others. The day came for me to get out, and my mentor was still there.
That is a amazing story, and I wanted to let everyone know that Justin is clinical outreach for Agape.
Yes.
So this all ties into that's how again, how you help the community tremendously. We've been at events together with iMind,
Yes.
of iMind, you were there. So, that's an amazing story how it leads in from prison to now this amazing outreach. When I was incarcerated, my mom reached out to, I reached out to my mom and, to talk to her, and she told me that she had cancer. So, like I was in my bunk and I couldn't keep tears away in there. The same thing, because, you're not showing emotion in that situation. So like people knew to like stay away from me and not talk to me, because in there that emotion turns into anger, and they know, you come up, hey, are you okay? And you're just going to get punched, because like they don't know how to, that's how you deal with that in that situation. My mom's always been there through my addiction or supporting that. I was a cause for that, like when you mentioned with your father, through all the stress I caused her, the night she's trying to take me to a treatment facility, or, I had a big part in that. And I felt like when I was sitting in there and I got my letters and I've got, my offers, that I said the same thing. I was praying to God that, God, if you just can, give me a chance, I will do whatever I need to, hit my knees, pray, whatever it takes, because I just couldn't believe my situation and the thing I was doing to the few people who did love me through all my wrongs. So I can identify with that. So through addiction, through going to prison, coming out with your mentor, a lot of people don't end up in a career, from that story. Do you think that God moment, that prison moment, that mentor was the piece that led you into, Agape or reach out, or the clinical reach out that you do to the community?
Sure. No, I know 100% it is. If it wasn't for me hitting that rock bottom and for the circumstances, and that's why I say like this whole thing to me was like a divine intervention, the way like things just fell into place. And I believe like I'm not special. I believe this opportunity is available for everybody. Just we all have different circumstances and it reaches us different times, different ways. But I knew in my heart of hearts, I knew that watching everything, all the pieces of the puzzle come together, that I knew it was a divine intervention, and I knew there was purpose in my life. And I've actually had people tell me, like my early recovery, like they would look at me and say, there's something special about you. There's something about you. Like I see you as a leader. And I'd never seen myself as a leader. Yeah, like when I was selling drugs and I had that ego, like I wanted to look at myself as a leader, but like, with the ego comes all the stuff that we don't see, is the insecurities that's pushing the ego, and all of that, fear and self-esteem and whatnot. And when I was able to really work through those core issues that was driving the ego and find my true identity, there's purpose attached to it. And I seen that there's purpose. And I told myself, I don't want to let all of that, I struggled with addiction for 18 years. In the beginning, it's fun. That's how it grabs a hold of you, right? I don't want to act like it was all bad times. In the beginning, it's fun. It's a party. It's cool. It's new. It's exciting, right? But then that's how it grabs a hold of you. And once it grabs a hold of you, it doesn't want to let go, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
It's just not fun anymore.
Yes. And but I always say the 18 years of my addiction, all that pain and suffering, and we can even go back, right? Like I do believe trauma can be a gateway into, addiction. For me, I think a lot of it was my trauma that caused me to seek these substances and a relief that these substances gave me, so we could even go further than those 18 years. But I said, I don't want to let all the pain and suffering from my lifetime have no purpose. And so with that, doors continued to open when I got out. And, originally I started working as a group facilitator to get my foot in the door with treatment. And then I went to become a primary therapist, at another treatment center, and I had a caseload. Once again, more pieces of the puzzle are coming together, because at that time I started doing my own trauma therapy, because as a man, a lot of like the bullying and the fighting and stuff that happened to me, I just thought it was a natural thing that natural boys and men go through in life. And I was talking with the clinical director, and I'm telling her like parts of my life, and she goes, that's trauma. And I'm like, no, it's not. And she's like, I'm like, that's just a normal childhood. And she's like, I'm telling you, that's trauma. She goes, what would you tell a client right now? And when she said that, it hit me. And I started having like a flashback going through like the videotape of my life. And I was like, well, when this happened, it made me feel this way. When this happened, it made me feel this way. When I started selling drugs, it was because of all this insecurity and fear and self-doubt. And when I started doing drugs, it took all of that away too. And I started looking at it. And so I dove really deep into trauma therapy. The same time I was doing my own trauma therapy, I got offered a job at another treatment center as a primary therapist. I started doing, that was my favorite, was childhood trauma therapy. And I start working with these clients and I'm getting through to them because I'm relating, like, I'm giving them my experience without giving them too much, because you have that client therapist relationship, right? And I'm looking at these clients and within a few sessions, I'm like, boom, there's your problem. And it started here. And they're like, how do you know? And we start doing this work and I'm watching this healing. And I got really attracted to the trauma therapy. And at the same time, I start learning about mental health. Every facility that I worked for prior to that was primary substance abuse. And at that time, Agape had opened up here in Port St. Lucie, and they had a great, phenomenal reputation for their mental health program as well. They were one of the first in Florida to actually offer primary mental health inpatient treatment. And so I started asking about them. I'm asking friends that work there and people that know them in the industry, and I'm like, are they really this good? Because I'm thinking about putting in an application, and they have a great reputation. And so I did. I jumped ship because I wanted to learn more about mental health. I'm grateful for that because I put in an application and I got a job there. And it started as a therapist. I was working 7 days a week to get my foot in the door, 5 days at the one program. And then on a weekend, I became the weekend therapist. And then I just kept asking them, hey, when could you bump me up to full time? I really love this place. And so I did. And they came to me and they said, listen, we love you. You're a phenomenal employee. You're great with the clients. Like, everybody loves you. And they said, but we don't have a position for you to come on as full-time therapist. And they're like, you have a clinical background. What about clinical outreach? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. And they're like, well, let's try this. So I started originally when I went full-time with them as half clinical outreach, half therapist. I fell in love with the outreach part, because it gives me an opportunity where people don't necessarily know my past with the prison and all of my addiction stuff. But with my education and my experience, and I could talk with people. And on the way here, I get an email from the local law enforcement agency that arrested me multiple times asking me for help with something. The court system that, when I was standing in front of the judge and the state attorneys trying to get me convicted of the habitual felony offender, and he's pushing the 30-year mandatory sentence, he literally called me, told the judge that I was unredeemable, that I would, if you look at my criminal record, that there's no chance of me ever changing, and I'm going to be a career criminal. And he said, Your Honor, he's a menace to the community. He said, please don't let him go out there and see the light of day again. And I'll never forget that. The same court system called me in to be a keynote speaker, 2 years ago. We have a veterans and first responders program, so I get to work a lot with veterans and first responders, and it's a trauma program for PTSD, the mental health track. I really love our mental health track. I learned what true mental health is. A lot of times, what we see is sometimes people get misdiagnosed. There's a lot of times where people go see a psychiatrist and they get put on medications because their condition mimics the true mental health diagnosis. However, it's unresolved trauma. One thing I'm proud about with the organization I work for is we offer more modalities of trauma therapy than any other treatment organization in this state. And I'm really proud of that because I got to sit there with the therapist and learn hands-on about these different modalities. Hypnotherapy, RTM, which is a new one, reconsolidation of traumatic memories, ART, RRT, EMDR, we do all these different modalities of trauma therapy. And talking with these clinicians that are very passionate, and they're very knowledgeable, I've learned so much more about, one, addiction, one, two, mental health, and three, trauma. And this education has helped me so much where, I feel like I have to just constantly give it away. And this goes back to, I guess, that original question is, yes, right? To me, I feel like God put this heart and this purpose in me where I want to save the world, and with my knowledge, I could sit there and talk with people for a little bit and kind of in a sense, diagnose what's going on. And whether it's our program, whether it's iMind, we work with iMind, a lot. We work with a couple other, leaders in the community for mental health and substance abuse. right? So it's like I have all these resources no matter what they are, and I just want to help people. And it goes back to that passion and purpose that I feel like God put in me is like, I wasn't like this before. I was a selfish, self centered drug addict, and all I cared about is how I can get over on you to keep getting high. And if it wasn't for this change and what I feel like God put in my heart to do is to help as many people as I can, I wouldn't be where I am today.
I completely identify through addiction and even through my business. I didn't care. Try to put a deal together, close a deal, close a deal, close a deal. I didn't really care as much what the outcome is with iMind and what they've done for me today. And God, I want to give back to the community. Recently joined the board of directors of iMind. I love to put that out there because they are doing amazing stuff. And today, through God, through giving back to the community, and even transferring that into business, because who you are as a core person, your true character, as through the giving back as the thing. With what are you seeing right now? Wanted to ask this earlier about Port St. Lucie in Florida, because I haven't been in it in 4 years, and I see addiction has changed and where it's going. Where do you see it today between fentanyl or all the different problems?
Well, I mean, it's changed tremendously, the last few years. What I'm seeing, and this is my opinion and my expertise of what I'm seeing. So, like the synthetic cannabinoids, the Delta 8, the Delta 9, some of this medical grade marijuana where they're raising the level of the THC, but they're lowering the CBD level. We're seeing a lot of people come in with, I would say, temporary mental health diagnosis, because it's more drug induced than the actual true diagnosis. Or, however, there was a previous condition and it wasn't fully formed, and the synthetic cannabinoid or this high concentrate THC with lowered CBD levels is actually making it come into fruition. We're seeing a lot of people come in with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, extreme suicidal ideations, extreme depression, anxiety. One gentleman, his anxiety is so bad that, he's pretty much locked himself in his room, and anytime he even thinks about going out, he has to smoke. It's the synthetic stuff, and if he doesn't have it, he throws up at the thought of going out in public.
Wow.
Right? And the reason I say it's a lot of times it's short acting and it's drug induced is because, working with them hand in hand, I've seen the healing take place. However, it's sad, that they're trusting in these things, with the synthetic cannabinoids like the Delta 8, the Delta 9, they're sold at, these vape shops, gas stations, so forth. Kratom, Kava. There's these debates. I look online, I don't get involved in the debating, but, there's people saying, oh, well, it hasn't affected me that way. Okay, cool. You can enjoy it. That's fine. Right? However, the harm that I'm seeing, it's not good. The 7.0, the strong version of the kratom, right? Mm. The withdrawal is severe. Our detox facility is not far from here, and I've had clients come to me and they're like, "This is worse than fentanyl," and I'm like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I don't think people really think they know what they're getting into. Some people are looking at it as an alternative to other substances. Some people are looking at it, maybe they're not an addict or alcoholic, but it's addictive and it has very strong effects. One new trend we're seeing, right, is the fentanyl. Majority of people know about fentanyl, but we have these other substances that they nickname on the street tranq, xylazine, neolazine. There's 4 analogs of it.
I've never even heard of any of these.
Okay, so it's basically sold mixed in with fentanyl or even maybe cut, and they say it's fentanyl, but it's really what they call tranq. And let's just say the one main substance is xylazine, but so it's not an opiate. It's more of a synthetic benzo, right? So, but however, it sedates you. So these opiate addicts, they're nodding out, right? It's sedating them, and it's very short acting. And so once they come out of what they call the nod, when they wake up from the effects, it's instant withdrawal. And so since it's such a high synthetic benzo, they call it tranq because it's an animal tranquilizer. Having that withdrawal is so intense the moment they come out of it. And this is stuff that's reported to me because I'm interested. I want to learn as much as possible to help, these people I come across that are struggling with this. And so the problem that we're seeing in the substance abuse in the treatment industry is like trying to treat the client, right? So because they're using such a high synthetic benzo, the taper medication really doesn't help as much as it does with other substances, right? So there's still a lot of physical withdrawal symptoms, and then there's post-acute withdrawal symptoms, right? And I was talking to our director of nursing. She's amazing. I felt so bad for this client because they're really going through with it. And I'm like, what do we do? And she goes, you have to just kind of treat the symptoms as they come. You know, if they come in and they're reporting nausea, you give them a PRN for nausea. If they have restless legs, you give them a PRN for this. What I see is because the withdrawal can be so intense is a lot of times they would rather give up the fight and leave treatment and go get high because they know that's that one thing that's going to help them immediately compared to like going through some of that withdrawal.
If a family member is seeing signs with, another family member, or how do they, reach out to you or Agape, and what's the process?
Sure. So if they wanted to reach out to Agape, of course they could, look up Agape Behavioral Healthcare on Google, and find it. Also, I'm the chair for the Treatment and Healthcare Committee for the Treasure Coast Overdose Task Force, so they can get involved with the Treasure Coast Overdose Task Force. If they've experienced, the loss of a loved one or someone struggling, they can come be a part of. We need support there. Right Life Services, Barbara Moody at Right Life Services, she is part of that committee. They have a lot of resources for, someone whose loved one may be struggling, or, maybe if a listener is struggling and they need help. But me, I think we spoke and you said that you were going to tag like my social media stuff.
Absolutely.
Right. So I have my phone on Do Not Disturb now, but my phone, literally from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to sleep, my phone doesn't stop.
What are your socials?
Sure. So on Facebook, Justin Giovinazzo. On Instagram, I believe it's the same. LinkedIn, it's just my name. I always say like my phone's on. My phone's on. If you're struggling, you need something, you want to talk, my phone's on. And I always let people know if I don't answer, it's because I'm in the middle of something. It's not that I'm ignoring you or sending you to voicemail or whatnot. It's just I'm constantly busy, and there's a strong demand for people that need help. Like there was a study last year that I read, and it said it was reported that it went from 1 in 6 families affected by substance abuse and mental health, and last year it was 1 in 2. And now if you look at the economy, just gas, eggs, milk, food, a lot of people are struggling right now. When I talk to people and I talk about mental health, I say a lot of people think of when they hear the word mental health, there's a stigma a lot of times. And they think of like the worst case scenario. They think of, someone who's schizophrenic, maybe like bipolar disorder. Like they always seem to go there rather than the basics. Everybody struggles with mental health. Right? If I was running late to come here to meet you and I'm rushing late and I'm driving fast and I get pulled over, my anxiety is going to go through the roof in that moment, right? That's mental health in a sense, right? Is the anxiety. If I lose a loved one or a family pet and I'm grieving, right? That's mental health. And it's like we all have emotions, right? And we all go through life.
Justin, I really appreciate you and you helping the community and Agape, and you've helped me personally, through my journey. You were there in the beginning. Matter of fact, I reached out to you in Rock Road from the beginning. Tiffany turned me on to you and reached out because I was at that point of hitting my knees. So I really thank you.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Realty Trader Talk podcast, sponsored by RealtyTrader.com. Appreciate y'all. Hit the subscription and like button, please. Trying to get my subscriptions up. Appreciate it.